Federico, welcome to the podcast.
Gavin, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Not at all, thank you. Yesterday, in doing my research and the previous week leading up to this, I felt quite comfortable until I started watching some of your videos yesterday. And suddenly I got all nervous about this podcast. You've had such an illustrious career, fantastic career. And I also think ballet, for a lad from the north of England, holds a certain prestige. So the combination of your illustrious career and ballet increased the nerves, I think, of this conversation today. But it's brilliant to be here. By the way, I hope the accent's okay.
100%. I understand everything. I hope you understand me with my Italian accent, I guess. But Gavin, can I say, look, in the end, when I remember when I was a kid, when I fell in love with ballet, I fell in love with movement and music. And I think that's a really relatable thing. Do we all love music? I think we do. We all like a kind of music. And, moving is such a great thing. And putting the two together, that's what I fell in love when I was a kid. And so I do know that ballet has this reputation of being, elitist and high heart, and people feel sometimes intimidated. I really wish that it wasn't like this, because at the base is such a primordial thing, moving to music, and then ballet can also tell stories, and Northern Ballet specifically, we can really tell stories through movement and music.
Yes, I want to ask you about the storytelling, because I think there's a big overlap in the storytelling in business and the storytelling in ballet and art and dance. The origin story of where Haworths came from, which we were just talking a little bit about off air, is very important to us and our brand and the feel of who we are and the culture. So I want to ask you about storytelling in ballet. What was your first experience of storytelling, and what role do you think it plays in the art of ballet?
So I think the storytelling in ballet for me personally, kind of snuck in. As I was saying, I fell in love with movement and music. I thought that was ballet and dance was about. But then my local school, where I used to train in Italy, we used to have this end of the year performance, and there was always a story. So all of a sudden, you were not just doing ballet class at the bar or on center. You were actually a character. So you had a costume and you were telling a story. And so without realizing, I think, I started to love the fact that you could perform, that you could tell a story. And yes, at the time, I remember one of the end of the year shows was The Wizard of Oz, and I was the scarecrow. I loved that. That's a big memory for me from my childhood. Little by little, I realized that actually ballet can definitely do that. Ballet is so many things. It's one word for so many things. And by the way, I use the term a bit loosely, ballet, dance, contemporary dance, all of these things we do at Northern Ballet and most ballet companies. We do a variety of styles. Storytelling is definitely central and crucial to what Northern Ballet does. Although that's not the only thing that we do. We do have sometimes abstract ballets. But storytelling, I think, is powerful when done through body, movement and music, because you can probably not say some of the intricacies than you can express via the spoken word. So famously, Balanchine, who is a famous choreographer, says, how do you tell a mother-in-law in ballet? You can't. How do you tell that relation between people? But then there are other things that I think movement and ballet specifically can do than the spoken word, I think better than the spoken word. So come and see Romeo and Juliet, the balcony pas de deux, two young people falling in love and discovering their sexuality and growing up. I think ballet can do that extremely well, and I would argue better than the spoken word sometimes. I'm sure some people would disagree with me, but this is what ballet and Northern Ballet I think is great. You can tell those big emotions that really reach deep into your soul, into your gut, very well.
Yeah, I can relate a little bit. Last year, me and my mum came to see the Nutcracker at the Grand Theatre, and as you were talking then, there's scenes of that ballet coming up in my mind where there is no words, obviously, but the the facial expressions, the movement of the body, you can tell what's going on. And I suppose also, without the spoken word, it opens up varied interpretations from the audience, doesn't it?
Mm.
There's a freedom of how you interpret that in some ways.
Absolutely. And look, in a sense, it's similar to a book. You might read a book and get some things, and then I read it and get different things. So there is that space between the art, the artifact, and what the person consuming or absorbing that art interprets out of the thing. So yes, that's why it's beautiful, right? Because you will have 1,000 people watching a performance of Nutcracker, and although the main story everybody will follow and understand the main story, but people will focus on different details, get touched by different things that happen on stage, and so people will often have a different interpretation of a scene, and that is, I think that's the beautiful thing, because when you go to see in general theater and particularly ballet, you have to work a little bit. It's not a completely passive and thing that you do. You have to go and work, but the reward, the satisfaction that you get out of it is bigger.
That is a lovely way of putting it. I think you're absolutely right. There is a little bit of work, isn't there, in following what's happening.
And look, sometimes, sometimes when I'm tired at the end of the day, I just want to sit and do something passive. And I do
Netflix
that.
On.
I don't know, watch TV. Yes, that is a bit more passive in my mind. And by the way, I love films and movies and all of that. Reading a book, watching a piece of theater, watching the ballet, it's more active. It's not completely passive, but the satisfaction, then you come out. And by the way, I think we should, as an industry, we really have to make an effort to be accessible to everybody. Because going back to what you said right at the beginning, we have this, we're known for being a bit inaccessible. I would say that Northern Ballet is really accessible, but basically we really think hard and we try to talk to people, to ask questions. How can we be more accessible? Because look, at the back, there is a real belief from my part, and most people, I would say everybody that works here, then we can connect with everybody, I think, with so many people. We can stories then connect with them, and we can really, I think we make people's lives better. I know that's a big thing to say, but I think arts do that and ballet does that.
I agree. As I was coming into Leeds this morning, by the way, for everyone who's listening and not watching, we're at the Northern Ballet HQ upstairs. It's got a beautiful view over Leeds, by the way. As we were driving in this morning, I was speaking to Chris, who produces the podcast, and we were saying, being brought up in the north of England, I didn't know anyone who did ballet. Certainly know guys that did ballet, but I didn't know anyone. Neither did Chris know anyone in his year or school or that did ballet. It was all football, Leeds United in our case. So it's something that I've arrived later at in life, but I've now been, we were just speaking off air then, I've seen the Nutcracker with my mum. We came to see the Three Generations last year. We then came to company class and watched all the dancers train with our children on a Saturday morning, and I've loved it. I just sit mesmerised, jaw open, like, wow.
And following on what you said, let me say a few words about Leeds and the amount of, Leeds as a ballet company, Northern Ballet, as Opera North, there is the Playhouse, there are museums and exhibitions. Let me just say a few words for this city, which is in the north of England and has so much happening. And the fact that you say that you didn't know anybody that does ballet, I think it's a sign to me of what we have to do, right? Where we have to work to, because so at Northern Ballet, we also have the Academy of Northern Ballet, and this is a vocational, we have different strands, so you can come and just do ballet for pleasure with no intention of becoming a professional, but we do also have a professional strand, and kids can train with us from 9 years old until 16 without leaving home, so they receive high quality and personalized education in ballet without having to leave home when they're really young. There are other schools where you have to go to a boarding school from the age of 10 or 11. So I think it's really important to have this center of excellence in the north, because talent is everywhere, Talent, I believe, is equally spread across the country, across people, and it's a question of people having the opportunity to access that. And that's what we try to do at Northern Ballet. Yes, give people the opportunity to come and see performances, but also the opportunity of training for ballet. Again, we believe it's worth it. So we try our best to make it accessible to everybody.
Yeah, I love it. Let me just go back one. You mentioned earlier about walking into an auditorium with 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I said at the start of the podcast, you had an unbelievable career. Watching some of your videos yesterday, I was so impressed. It's just mind-blowing. At the Zurich Ballet, the Dutch Ballet, the Royal Ballet in London. So, we're in an auditorium. There's 1,000 people. You've got a big show. You're the solo dancer. People are starting to take the seats. There's a hush, the anticipation from the audience. A couple of latecomers scrambling down the row to get to their seats. The lights are going down. Just take us through the sort of 10, 15 minutes before the show starts and the curtain comes up of what it's like being a performer at that level, Federico, as the show is about to start.
Gavin, if you don't mind, I'm going to start even earlier because I was telling you when I was a student and we were doing the Wizard of Oz end of the year performance. I didn't know, I was young and I just loved it. I went on stage, no nerves, no fear, just go and have fun because it was really fun. And then how you go through school and, there is a lot of investment from, definitely from myself or the person doing the training, but also from the family. It becomes, you're trying to make it as a career. So you finally get your first job and then you're performing in front of 1,000 people or more, depending, right? And then sometimes you do a soloist role and sometimes a principal role. So the pressure can go higher and higher. And it depends, every individual is different. But for me, at some point, I started to feel it as a pressure. And of course, if you're nervous, things can go wrong, right? You tend to not perform at your best. And then with experience and with the help, I worked a lot with a sport psychologist. And with her help, I really started to realize that a little bit of nerves are necessary. And I think this is applicable to all sorts of life. I'm sure your job and many people's work, if you're completely relaxed, you will probably forget something. Yeah. But if you're too nervous, then you will also not perform at your best. And so what was really helpful for me, and yes, it did happen the 15 minutes before the show, but actually happened the day before, the week before, when a big opening night approaches, you tend to, swallow a bit harder and you think,
yes,
gosh,
the anticipation
I hope
is
exactly.
raising. Yeah.
And so what I remember learning was that to notice. So to notice that I was probably a bit nervous and to understand that a little bit of nerves made sure that I was getting ready and I was being prepared correctly. And so to accept it, look, I've got a little bit of nerves and that is going to help me to prepare well if I keep the nervous level to an acceptable level. And then what really helped me a lot was understanding broad focus and narrow focus. So you can, a week out, think of what you're going to do in 7 days, the big opening night, the big performance. But actually what you should really be focusing is on the rehearsal that day. And so you narrow your focus and focus on what you're doing now, because what you're doing now will allow you to do a good job later on. But it can also happen during the performance itself. Say that it's a big night or 10 minutes before the curtain goes up. I could be thinking at that very difficult step, that very difficult pas de deux that I'm doing at some point. But actually, I should probably focus at the first steps. Then I do in the ballet to do those well. And when I get to at the end, then I'll think about the end. Even more, I should focus at warming up now. So maybe I need a sip of water. Maybe I need to stretch. Maybe I need to talk to somebody so that I feel a bit better. So narrow focus. Do the thing that you need right now. I don't know, some people would say live in the present, but it really helps. It's not without a thought of the future. Obviously, you need to prepare for what comes in the future, but you need to concentrate on what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, I love that. I think it reminds me of meditation, mindfulness meditation, and being very much in the moment, which, as everyone will know, is easier said than done. But the broad focus, narrow focus to calm the nerves before I can see. Federico, I want to ask you about perfectionism. Looking from the outside in at ballet, it appears to me a very precise art. hand position, foot position, everything position needs to be perfect. But we're only human. The dancers are only human, not robots. How did you in your career balance the need to be, in quote, perfect and being human?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Gavin. It's I think it's present in many disciplines, definitely in ballet. I'll tell you a few stories. I mean, ballet dancers tend to have a high attention to detail, as you're saying, because of what we have to do, but sometimes it manifests in funny ways. Like, we start our day at the bar. Some people really need the bar to be perpendicular to the walls, right? If it's a little bit off, that's not good enough. You need to put it back in.
Yeah.
I remember as a dancer, and my desk where you do makeup before the show, things like that. Some people need to have everything arranged really at the right thing. If there is a little bit of, I remember somebody, you could put him off by putting a little scrunch of paper on their spot because they didn't like that. Because, it needed to be a certain way.
Yeah.
We all have this. I guess ballet dancers need to pay attention to details, absolutely. I will tell you that me personally, I almost stopped dancing because I was falling down that rabbit hole of perfectionism. And I would say, of course, obviously, I would never achieve perfection. And so I got to a point where I almost wanted to, I'd rather not do it if I couldn't do it perfectly. Which is, with inside now, of course, you will never do it perfectly. And I basically stopped enjoying my dancing. And I'm lucky because I do what I love. Although I don't dance anymore, but I really love dancing. So there wasn't just a job for me, but I wanted to stop. I really was in a funny headspace. And then I realized that I could still aim really high and really work hard and do my best. And I also needed to accept that I would never reach perfection. And I needed to be kind to myself and said, what I want is to work hard, work intelligently, look after myself, be kind to myself, and then that's where I will get. And look, objectively, I did pretty well in my career, but it was not perfect. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And so I needed to get to a point where I was satisfied with that. And so at the end of the performance, when I look back and I said, that went really well, that could have been better, rather than be a bit down for a couple of days because that didn't work, I needed to, next time I'll try and do it better. What can I do? How can I prepare to do it better? Rather than be a bit depressed is a big word, right? I don't think I was ever depressed, but I was a bit down, right, and disappointed.
I can relate so much to it, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners can as well. In fact, off air, we were just talking about a new business appointment that I went to last Friday in Manchester. And the meeting went well, I felt. There was 5 people around the table, but there were a couple of questions that I didn't feel I really hit on. My answers weren't as crisp as I thought they ought to have been. And I spent Friday, a little bit of Saturday thinking, I just didn't quite get that right, And anyway, I spoke to the person who was in charge of the meeting, the prospect, on the Monday, and he said, from our perspective, it was very positive. It went brilliant. Hopefully we'll be working together. So I need not have worried, but I think when you hold yourself to such high account, and it's also 2 sides of the same coin, isn't it? It's that which makes you successful, but it's also that which, if not managed correctly, can pull you down.
And I think there is a crucial point there in what you say, which is being aware of that. So kind of having that ability of and being aware of what's happening in your head. As you say, sometimes you need to push yourself quite hard, right, to do things well in any kind of profession. So I'm not against that kind of hard work and trying to do things really well. It's just that obviously if you it can definitely go too far. And so it's being aware of where you are, how much are you pushing yourself. And, in the end, life is now. Like, I want to live well. I want to be happy now. And things are difficult sometimes, right? Right now in the arts, it's a difficult time. It's really tricky. But I can't hold my breath and wait for in 2 years when things are better, because then that's 2 years of your life, right? So you need to be able to Is it about enjoying? Yes, it's about, I I think we should try to enjoy life. I think, and especially when I hear you talk, I think you're passionate about the work that you do, and I know that I'm passionate about my work, and people working on Northern Ballet are. So even when things are difficult and hard, we should try to find a way to enjoy them, because life is better that way.
Absolutely. I want to ask you about performing again, particularly with a partner. So when I was watching your videos yesterday, some unbelievable solo performances, but also some duets. Is that the right word? Yeah, a duet with a female partner. In your opinion, Federico, with all the years' experience you've got of dancing and performing and at such a level, when you dance with a partner, how do you make magic? To use Bruce Springsteen's phrase, how do you make 1 + 1 = 3?
I like that. Look, there are so many things, and we can talk about technique, right? Ballet technique. And then, of course, if you're, physical attributes, some people can spin, do pirouettes really easily. Some people struggle. Then, of course, if they're in a ballet duet, often how tall people are makes a difference. All these things are important, but in the end, they are not. Yeah. Really, what matters is how do you connect with the person in front of you. In my career as a ballet dancer, I've danced with some amazing female dancers, ballerinas. When I really enjoyed it is when I could look into their eyes and really connect. That made a difference. And it didn't really matter technically if things worked or not. It was that connection. Because again, especially if you're telling a story, especially if you look into a person and you see them, they're really believing in their character, they're really acting their character, then you can get lost in that. And although in ballet, we kind of have steps, right? So we know what we're going to do in advance. But every time is different at the same time. So although the steps are, in theory, the same every performance, then we perform, we dance, but every time is different. And and it's that connection that makes it worthwhile. It's that connection that makes you understand what the other person is doing, what the other person is feeling, and then it brings a duet to another level.
Yes. It reminds me when you say to get lost in the character is when you get that sense of flow. When you're in a task or a performance in your case, or even in a presentation in a business environment, and time almost stops, stands still, disappears, and you're so in flow that the next time you look up and become conscious, it's done.
And Gavin, the amazing thing about ballet and storytelling is then you can be people then you're not, and you can be people on stage then you would not want to be in real life. And look, Northern Ballet is about to perform Romeo and Juliet, and I guess people, who wouldn't love to be Romeo, or who wouldn't love to be Juliet, right? Okay, maybe, I wouldn't like to be in that position where I actually kill the brother of the person I love, right? That's terrible. But then there are other characters that you definitely would not want to be. I remember as a dancer myself, I used to dance a character that was called Prince Rudolph, who was the crown heir to the Austrian throne, and he kills himself at the end. Actually, he kills his lover, and then he kills himself. Please, let's not go there, right? Yeah. I really don't want to be that person in real life. But playing that character on stage is such a rewarding thing, which is really weird to say. Then it's rewarding to play somebody who is definitely depressed and abusive in many ways, but to be given the opportunity to try things without actually hurting anybody, and to really get into the psyche, into the head of that person, of that character, that is amazing. That is incredible.
Is that because it allows you to explore untapped sides of yourself, perhaps?
Absolutely. I think you're really onto something there, Gavin, because we all have, I think, and that's what I think I used to try to do as a dancer, which is try to find that part of my personality that is a bit similar to that character that I'm playing. And maybe I don't feed that personality, right? That trait, because I don't want to be, abusive or something like that. But we are all complex characters, right? And you get a a chance of portraying that part of you on stage and to feed that part of you and to get completely lost in that. And that is incredibly rewarding. And I think as an audience member, that's what people connect to. When I'm watching a performance, that's where I connect to. That's where I completely believe and you know, I'm root or you know, or I push against that character on stage where I'm really convinced then that's happening in front of me on stage.
Yes, I totally agree. That's the relatable bit, isn't it? The bit, was it Freud who sort of coined the shadow side of our being, and you know, whether that may be anger, jealousy, aggressiveness, things that we have to admit we have, but we manage in day-to-day life so that we can all live together. But it's very interesting to hear you sort of show that in ballet, which I don't think, from my perspective, let me say, would automatically see that. But clearly there are characters with this shadow side in them. And I also suppose, Federico, you correct me if I'm wrong, but to reach the very top, like you did in ballet across the world, you have to have a bit of that shadow side?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it connects to the fact, you know, there is this idea of the artist as the tortured soul. And I don't know, there are definitely artists that have complex personalities and they struggle. I don't necessarily think then you have to. And look, I try to live my life being happy without being tortured or you know, going to extremes. Although I had colleagues then were a bit like that. Is it the same thing? I want to say no. Then you can channel that energy on stage and then try to live your life in a different way. But you are absolutely right. And there are people that are, you know, then have to express that anguish than they feel in real life. They have to bring it on stage to, otherwise it explodes. Otherwise they don't know where to go. I don't know. I feel I'm lucky. I'm happily married. I have a daughter, and my personal life has been wonderful, you know, because of the people, with lots of, you know, hardship here and there, and in many ways, but also really, I feel really lucky about my personal life.
And, yeah.
But at the same time, I wanted to have that outlet, on stage where you can be. So as a dancer, I was at the beginning of my career almost typecast as the prince. You know, again, ballet is so complex, so there are these complex characters, but then there are definitely the fairy tales. So I was the prince in Cinderella, and yes, I was Romeo. I was seen as that because probably I played it naturally and I played it well on stage, but I was missing playing the baddie, the tortured person on stage, because that is so much fun, right? And you can really let out some of the other sides of your character on stage. Then you can only do that. So although I try to live my life in a good way, I love being, I can remember scenes of, because ballet, you know, you think of ballet Nutcracker, yes, and ballet, the fairy tale, yes, it's definitely that. And I think there is a big space for that. But ballet is also, I don't know, taking drugs on stage or killing somebody on stage, or it's all of ballet is life. So life is so complex. Yes, there are the lovely, uplifting stories, and then there are the tragic stories. And I think ballet can do all of these things. And the best ballets have lots of these ingredients in the very same evening. And one more thing that I want to tell you is that what I would love to do with Northern Ballet, what I think we all are on board to do at Northern Ballet, is to really tell stories that sometimes you don't expect. And in a sense, it's really important. We always talk about reaching new audience. It's really important the kind of stories that you tell. So if you always talk about, I don't know, a king and a queen and a prince and a princess in ballet, then you will read. I think there are stories that have a big space in ballet and they should be continued, but they cannot be the only thing that we say. We also have to tell stories that are different. So may that be about, people that are not having the loveliest time. You know, sometimes it's tragedy. Sometimes it's the people you talk about. And to do that it depends on the people that make the ballet, right? So if we have people that come from all different walks of life making our ballets, they're likely to talk about their own experience. And the more broad and diverse the stories are, the more likely we are to reach more people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's what I try and do with Howarth's, Federico. It's the richness of the diversity. You know, for example, I don't know if this relates or not. I'm shooting from the hip a little bit now. But if I get an email from someone who says, let us help you with your marketing. We work with many people in your industry. Immediately for me, that's a delete, because I don't want to be like anyone else in our industry. I want to take experience and inspiration from as far left and right as possible to create something special. And it reminds me when you were talking, we ran an event at Howarth last year, and your colleague, David, spoke at the event. And in the audience was the commercial manager of a rugby league team. And the way that David spoke about the dancers, clearly athletes, and the audience member who was representing rugby league and the athletes in that team, they actually had a great conversation after the event, just sharing stories and relating about performance, about performing in front of crowds, about the challenges with athletes, and the fusion of something like ballet with rugby league could to some people feel stratospheres apart.
Yes.
But actually it isn't. And why not bring them together in some way, or shared stories and experiences? And
Gavin, I think David told me about the conversation. So although I probably don't know the details, it's something that I remember because, as you say, it was a great conversation. Yes, absolutely. And look, going back, you said, and you grew up and you didn't know anybody that was doing ballet. So, it's maybe because the stories then we were telling were not interesting to you or to your friends or to the people around you. So there needs to be a conscious effort from people like me and other people. Then, I have a big say about what kind of repertoire Northern Ballet does, right? So, and again, I can only be the product of my life, of my history, and that is probably interesting, and I've done a lot, but it's only my experience. So it's about being really open and seeking influences from other people. So I don't know, for instance, we are starting next week a new ballet. So there is a choreographer coming to choreograph a new ballet, which is a contemporary response to our Romeo and Juliet. So Romeo and Juliet is a great production of Northern Ballet and was first created in 1991. We revived it this year after 15 years, then was not performed. And I think it's a really great show, and it was really successful. We're taking it to the home of the Royal Shakespeare Company in September, which is going to be a great experience. And I think it's a really good ballet, really stands for what Northern Ballet is, and in a sense is also a ballet, and Romeo and Juliet is very much the heritage of, not just England and the UK, the Western world, we all tend to know on that story, and it's a wonderful thing. And I was really keen to, when this choreographer who's called Mututuzeli November, who is a man from South Africa, he came to me and we were talking about what can we do next, what could you do for the company, and he had this, he thought about this novel, South African novel, which is called Hill of Fools, which is known in South Africa for being similar to Romeo and Juliet in the story. So there are two township villages, and there are two young people that love each other, but the two villages are, the worst of enemies, and then there is, of course, somebody dying. So, it is definitely not Romeo and Juliet, but it's got a recognizable similarity to Romeo and Juliet. So Mututuzeli is making a new ballet starting next week, and it's going to be called Fools, so taking inspiration from the South African novel, and it's a bit of a contemporary response to Romeo and Juliet. And so in a sense is, building on the tradition of the past and trying to find the traditions of the future, and trying to tell stories from different perspectives. And most definitely, Mututu's life experience is completely different to mine, for instance, and to the people that have made Romeo and Juliet. So I think this is one of the things that we can do, because I think he will make it, I just really think he will make for great art, involving these people and put them together, and these incredibly creative people in the studio telling stories that they're passionate about, something really good is going to come out of.
Yeah, I'm sure. I will be getting tickets to that for sure. There's something you said there which I could relate to very clearly about the heritage of the past and the future. And, you know, we were talking just before we started recording about how it's been a family business, my parents starting the business and me being the sort of second generation successor. And that's exactly how I see my role, is to respect the heritage of the past, of what mum and dad did, the values, the culture, how they built it, but also changes, you know, and changes in a way that is fit for the future, adapt, innovate, and trying to find the sweet spot between the two to not lose where you came from, but also progress into the future is a challenge I personally can very much relate to.
Yes. I mean, and look, if I think of Northern Ballet, there's been many people that came before me. Now I'm the artistic director. Many people before me then have built this company, then have built the traditions of this company. So my predecessor, David Nixon, before that, Christopher Gable, and many more before that. And so I very much see it as my role to make sure that the traditions that these great people before me have built for the company are one of the pillars that the company, the Northern Ballet, stands on. While at the same time, it cannot be the only pillar. We need to make the new traditions for the future. And because basically we're creative people, I think we all are, right?
Yes,
of course,
agreed.
It's easy to say ballet dancers, artists, we're creative people, but I think you're creative. Everybody needs to be creative. So we need to exercise that creativity, to find the new processes, the new ways of working. And it's a question of balance in the end. So the new stuff is a pillar, and then the tradition has to be another pillar. And that's where we build strong foundations for the company.
Can I ask you about your family?
Yes, of course.
Your wife, Hikaru,
Yeah.
is a professional dancer.
So she stopped dancing.
Dancing.
So she was a professional dancer.
Yeah.
Now she's a guest coach with Northern Ballet, and she also has her production company. And so Hikaru, you might be able to tell by the name, but she was born in Japan. We've lived in the UK for a long time, but she's obviously got very strong connections. So she works in Japan quite a bit and organizes performances there. And at the same time, she helps here at Northern Ballet.
Yes. Just let me ask you the role that Hikaru has played in your professional career, and without wishing to make you emotional, about your daughter.
Yes.
Since your daughter's come along, has that changed you? Has that changed your view on ballet work?
Oh, I don't know. My daughter's been in the studio or in the theater from the very beginning.
Yes, I can imagine.
When she was born, she's the only son we have. And Hikaru came back to the stage quickly, and definitely quickly. And so she was back in the ballet studio fairly soon after giving birth. So my daughter was, at the time we were at the Royal Ballet, so at the Opera House in London. And so everybody knew her as a baby, and so growing up, and she spent a lot of time either, in the green room, in the theater. My parents and Hikaru's mom were incredibly helpful at the time. Also shout out to the company then allowed us to do that, because it's obviously not necessarily the case everywhere, but my daughter was welcome in the theater. Obviously we needed to keep her safe, the stage is a special environment and all that. But so she's been around ballet and music and movement, so I've got some incredible videos of her watching rehearsals when she was a toddler and standing up and starting to move, responding to the music.
Watching you rehearse?
Actually,
Mum.
That time I could film it, so I was not dancing. There were other people dancing in the studio, and the music was very engaging, and people were, dancing away, and my daughter just stood up and started to imitate the movements. There was a ballet about Virginia Woolf, and I found that particular piece was about the waves, one of her books. I've got this video. It's incredible. But actually, my daughter now does not do ballet. So although she's been exposed to ballet from ever, I think, she decided not to continue in ballet training. She did do it for a little while, and it's very important for me and for my wife. Then she makes her own decisions. Obviously, having two parents then did something. Being a ballet dancer is almost not just a job; it's like a life choice.
A life, yes.
The time dancers invest in what they do is really a lot. Enough pressure, having two parents that have done it and done it successfully. So it needs to be her choice. But then what can I tell you? At the moment, she loves gymnastic and singing and acting. So, at the moment, she's in that artistic space, but it's going to be her choice going forward.
Yes, I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my wife, Jen, I work with, Jen works at Haworth's, and we love it, to be honest. We haven't found many problems particularly. Maybe that's because we actually are on different floors and we don't see each other that much. But it's worked really well for us. You've danced with Hikaru?
Yes. So we've danced.
How does that go?
Yeah, it's interesting. We used to fight a lot at the beginning. So it was quite interesting because we danced, as company work, we danced together a little bit, but we weren't usually paired with each other to dance. As a dancer, usually you don't really choose who you dance with. It's the artistic director, so in this case me now, but and so we didn't dance together when we were both dancing that much. We did a few things and we loved it, but before we started dancing together in the space of the professional ballet company, we danced together as freelancers, and so usually you don't have a ballet staff in front of you, so you organize your own rehearsals, and we had a lot of fights at the time, which we are usually, I guess, I'm saying it now, you should ask other people, but usually we're kind of people then easy to get along, but put us together in the studio at the beginning, it wasn't easy. But we had to learn, and I think me specifically, I had to learn a lot. Somehow, the rules of politeness that I usually employ with other people, I somehow didn't when I was working with my girlfriend at the time.
Yes, I can relate to that.
Which doesn't make any sense, right?
No, it doesn't.
But and so we got into fights.
Sometimes I send an email to Jen about something to do with work, and I'll read it back. I'm like, I won't actually send it quite like that to anyone else.
Exactly.
For some reason.
That was the problem. I think we learned, and later on we had some wonderful times in the studio rehearsing and then on stage, and I danced with her for her last performance. She stopped a couple of years before me, and that was amazing.
You had the last dance together?
Yes. So it was a big production, and we were two of the main characters there, and that was her last production, and then it was the last performance, and it was really quite amazing.
Beautiful. End on a kiss?
Sorry, end on a kiss.
Did it end on a kiss?
Yes.
Is it a romantic story?
It was not. Well, yeah. At the time, in that production, she was in love with me, but I was not with her, so it was a bit dramatic.
Okay, yeah. Good. I want to just ask you about timing and luck. I saw in one of your previous conversations and interviews, you very humbly, I felt, talked about timing and luck, combination of hard work as well. How do you see it looking back now, Federico, in your career, about timing, luck? What are your beliefs on it? And also faith?
I guess it's still quite similar in the sense I definitely know that talent is very important and then hard work is very important. And I also think they're not enough. Then you also sometimes need to be at the right time in the right place, so the right opportunity needs to come along. So I think it's a combination of all of these things. And look, yes, what am I thinking? I'm thinking of equality of opportunity. I think that's really important, and we all need to work really hard to make sure that people have equal opportunities throughout their career, to get into a profession, to advance in an environment. And that's really important. And right now, as two people are leading our respective organization, that's our responsibility to make sure then there is a level playing field, so then people have the opportunity to express their talent. At the same time, it's there is talent is, some people have the talent and some people have less talent. That's unfortunately a hard fact of life, and we all need to come to terms with it. And hard work is really important. And so in a sense, being able to work hard, but to also to be able to relax, and to recover in your head. That's also part of talent. You see, in ballet, we might talk about physical talent, obviously, flexibility, coordination, strength. These are all things that come to mind when you think about talent in the ballet world. But the head is so important as well, because you will have periods of intense work, and it's my responsibility as the artistic director to make sure that these moments of stress are acceptable, that they don't go too far. But then it's also the ability of the dancer, of the choreographer, of the designer, of everybody that is involved in making a production to work quite intensively, right, on the lead up of a production, while being able to then find the time to depressurize, to relax, so then you're then able to do it again. And then sometimes it's luck, right? It's like when I applied for this job at Northern Ballet, then I feel incredibly lucky to have. I was lucky that at that time in my career, I was what Northern Ballet was looking for, their artistic director. And if Northern Ballet had been in a different space at the time, it wouldn't have made me any less prepared or right for the job, but the opportunity might not have been there. So that's where I talk about luck, right? That is also part of it. And so sometimes when I talk to colleagues, then are trying to do something, or be there dancers, then want to take their next step, or maybe dancers then want to move into their next phase of their career. Sometimes it's a question of luck. The right opportunity has to be available for you to take at that time.
For everything to come together. I remember your story about how you first came across ballet, walking past a ballet school and the sign outside, audition today.
I don't actually remember it, but that's what my mom says. Then there was just a sign outside the ballet school saying open day, please come in. And we did. And, kudos to my mom. At the time, how old was I? 5. Maybe not every parent would have sent their male son to do ballet, which is silly. And I hope and I think we're moving beyond that. But definitely was the time in Italy when I was a kid, 40 years ago. And I walked in, maybe it was important, and there was a male ballet teacher teaching that, teaser class. And when I left the room, my mom tells the story, then the teacher said, Federico, I see you next week, okay? And I said, yes, see you next week. And so mom had to sign me up, I guess. And then I continue from there.
Wow, fantastic. Federico, I feel like I've got another 20 questions to ask you, but we haven't got the time, so maybe we'll have to record a part 2. Is there anything else, just before we wrap up, that you would like to say about Northern Ballet to the listeners? Anything that you feel we haven't covered, but you want to do while we've got the opportunity and we're together?
Okay, yes, I think there is something. Look, I was born in Italy. I've worked in the UK for a very long time. I feel the UK and England is my home. I think we have something incredibly powerful and valuable in England, in the UK, and I think particularly in Northern Ballet, but I would extend it to the performing arts in this country. This country does the performing arts in an incredible way, and not taking everything away from the country that is still my own, that is Italy, that has incredible excellence as well. There is something magical about theatre, ballet, storytelling, music, live performance in the UK. And I just want to say it's amazing what we have. Please continue to go out and watch live theatre, live ballet, because it's incredible. And that's how we nurture it. There is so many talented people, so many passionate people at Northern Ballet, and I know in many other organizations. So anybody that listens to this podcast, go see a live show. Please come and see Northern Ballet as well if you can. And go see a live show, because it's so amazing. And we have something that is precious here in the UK, and we need to continue to nurture it. And the best way you can do that is come out and watch a performance.
Federico, I can feel the optimism, the positivity, the passion across the table as we sit here. If that doesn't make anyone listening want to go and see a ballet or dance, any theatre, I don't know what will. And just to add, again, and we sort of started at this point, as a lad from the north of England with a working class father from a one-parent council house in Leeds, not any experience of ballet, not brought up with ballet at all, and having only found it later in life, I would just second everything you've said. When I came to see it with my mum and with my wife, and when we brought our 2 young children to see the dancers practicing, all of us were in awe and absolutely loved the experience. And I felt it opened our mind, in a way, in a creative, inspirational way. So get tickets for your partner, get tickets for your kids, get tickets for your relatives, and support, like you, Federico, so articulately put, the creative industry in the UK.
Gavin, thank you so much. And I have to say, there is a podcast there to ask you about your story. I hope you make one where you interview yourself, because I have lots of questions. I'm really interested to hear more.
Thank you.
And thank you for this opportunity to talk about Northern Ballet, to talk about me, to talk about the performing arts in the UK. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Federico. The pleasure's all ours, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.